Our radio team intercepted a strange SOS signal deep in the Arctic, repeating endlessly. At first, we thought it was an error, some old frequency bouncing off frozen cliffs or stray data from a weather station. But the consistency of the signal was too perfect, too intentional. The same message, over and over, transmitting in Morse code. SOS in coordinate SOS. No origin. No calcine. No identification. We'd picked up thousands of signals before: military, civilian, emergency. This wasn't like any of them. The transmission had a texture, a depth to its tone, like it had aged somehow. Still, the urgency behind it made it impossible to ignore. Our tech, Jonah, narrowed the source down to a remote patch of sea ice near Greenland. It shouldn't have been reachable. No structures, no stations, just frozen wilderness. But the signal came like clockwork, faint, haunting, and unrelenting. When Jonah dug deeper, something stranger emerged. The metadata from the signal included a timestamp, or what looked like one. At first, it made no sense, an unfamiliar format, almost corrupted. But when we converted it, chills ran through the room. The embedded data indicated the signal had originated in 1924. Everyone went quiet. That couldn't be right. There was no way a signal from 100 years ago could still be broadcasting. Not without maintenance, not without power, not without someone or something keeping it alive. We sat around the map spread across the table, staring at the icy coordinates again. The ocean had shifted over time, and the area was now covered in thick layers of permafrost. It had once been navigable waters barely, but now it was unreachable by most modern vessels. Still, the signal begged to be answered. Against the advice of command, our small team assembled an expedition. We were a mix of engineers, researchers, and techs used to operating in harsh environments. But even we weren't ready for what lay ahead. The journey to the coordinates was brutal. Winds screamed across the ice fields like banshees. Machines malfunctioned. GPS failed in short bursts. The deeper we moved toward the heart of the Arctic, the more the world seemed to turn on itself. At night, the signal got louder, clearer, as if it sensed us drawing near. Jonah started sleeping with the receiver under his pillow, obsessively tracking every beep. It was beginning to affect us, all our sleep, our judgment. I began dreaming in Morse code, the rhythms drilling into my subconscious like they were meant for me. After 5 days of travel, our convoy came to a halt. Just beyond a ridge of ice and snow, something metallic jutted out of the ground. It looked like a whole, massive and rusted, half buried beneath a century of frozen silence. We thought it was a mirage at first. The sky shimmered with Arctic haze and light bent in strange ways. But as we got closer, the shape came into full focus. It was a ship, a forgotten vessel from a forgotten time. Not a modern icebreaker or submarine. This thing had masts, rivets, and markings long worn away by wind and snow. It shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have still been in one piece. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees as we approached. Though our instruments didn't record the shift, our breath turned thick in the air, hanging like smoke. The SOS signal, still pulsing in our ears, now echoed from the ship's direction, no longer just from the receiver. It was as if the ship itself was calling out to us. Jonah trembled as he pointed toward the bridge. "It's broadcasting from inside," he whispered. We broke through the crusted snow and ice that had frozen the doors shut. The metal groaned as it gave way, and a wave of air, stale, ancient, and oddly warm, brushed against us. The darkness inside was absolute, broken only by our headlamps. The beam of my light passed over decayed furniture, shattered glass, and old brass equipment that seemed untouched by time. Dust hung motionless in the air, as though afraid to move. And then we saw it. A radio room, with gears still turning, meters still blinking weakly, and a Morse key softly tapping on its own. There was no power source, no generator, no fuel, just the quiet, rhythmic tapping that had been reaching out into the void for a century. We didn't speak. We couldn't. Something about the place silenced us. It felt like stepping into a mausoleum, except the bodies were missing. No signs of life, but also no signs of death. No logs detailing their final moments. No frozen skeletons in bunks. Just that eerie, persistent signal and a sense that we were no longer alone. One of the team noticed strange etchings in the walls near the transmitter symbols we couldn't recognize, like runes or foreign script, but scratched in a frenzy. The deeper we explored, the more questions we found. Time inside the vessel seemed off. Watches ticked slower, batteries died quicker, and the signal never stopped. Back at base, they told us what we found was impossible. No known ship matched the design. No historical records mentioned a missing crew in that area. And when we tried to replay our recordings, the audio came out, scrambled whispers overlapping, Morse turning into words we never heard while on board. Some of the team refused to speak of it. Others had nightmares. But one thing was clear, that signal had waited a long time to be heard, and we answered it. When we reached the coordinates, what we found wasn't just unsettling, it was impossible. A ship, long buried in ice, stood before us like a monument to forgotten time. It wasn't listed on any naval registry, nor did it match any known model from recorded history. The design was both familiar and alien, its hull made of reinforced steel mixed with wooden structures, as if it had been constructed during a transition between centuries. Strange symbols were etched into its sides, partially worn away by wind and frost, none of which matched any known language. It felt like the ship had been lost, not just in space, but in time itself, wedged between eras that never should have touched. The ice around it was unnaturally smooth, as though something had melted and refrozen it rapidly, forming a glass-like shell. We had come expecting ruin, perhaps even a hoax. But this vessel was preserved, intact enough to raise questions that made our bones ache with unease. Jonah, ever the skeptic, initially tried to rationalize it. He said it must have been part of a lost Soviet expedition or an undocumented American research mission. But even he couldn't ignore the facts. The materials weren't right. The technology inside the ship didn't belong to any known period, and the ship's layout was inconsistent, as if someone had designed it without fully understanding how ships were supposed to work. There were too many inconsistencies. The corridors were built at odd angles. Doors opened into walls. Some rooms had furniture bolted to the ceilings, as if the concept of gravity had been optional. No two rooms looked like they had come from the same decade. One was filled with what looked like World War I-era Morse equipment. Another had control panels with smooth, featureless glass panels that blinked like modern touchscreens, but were clearly non-functional. It was like walking through a dream, built from the fragmented memories of different generations. The cold inside was different, too. Not the biting Arctic wind we were used to, but something that felt more deliberate, like the ship itself was cold, not from the ice, but from something deeper. It radiated from the walls, not as a temperature, but as a sensation. We all felt it, not just physical chill, but an emotional one, like dread soaked into steel and wood. When I placed my hand on a metal railing, I felt something pulse under the surface. Not heat or electricity, but movement like the ship still breathed, slow and ancient. One of the researchers, Davis, said he heard whispers whenever he entered certain rooms. None of us heard it at first, but we couldn't deny that sometimes the silence had a rhythm to it, like hushed voices paused just out of hearing range. In the center of the ship was a chamber none of us could explain. We had to pry it open. There was no visible mechanism, no handle, just a solid surface that eventually gave way when Jonah applied a frequency generator. Inside, there were no seats, no controls, only a circular pit in the floor, filled with a dark, glassy substance. It reflected nothing, absorbed light like a void. I dropped a flare into it. No splash, no sound, just silence. The flare vanished, like it had been erased from existence. We backed out slowly, the oppressive sensation growing heavier the longer we stayed. The walls of the chamber were lined with markings again, symbols none of us could decipher, but this time they glowed, faintly in our presence, pulsing in sync with the SOS signal we'd been tracking. Later that night, we tried to map the ship, but couldn't. The dimensions never matched up. Hallways looped impossibly. Doors led back to the same room even after turning corners. Some of us began to suspect we were being toyed with, that the ship wasn't just abandoned, but aware. One of our engineers, Harris, vanished after going below deck. We searched for 6 hours. Nothing. Then he reappeared back in the radio room, eyes wide, shaking, unable to speak. When he finally muttered words, they didn't make sense. He kept repeating numbers and dates that meant nothing to us until Jonah recognized some of them as the coordinates of other long-missing expeditions. It was like the ship had shown him something, or worse, spoken through him. The more time we spent on board, the more it felt like we were being studied, not watched, studied. Every movement, every sound, echoed back at us, slightly delayed, like the ship was learning our patterns. Our equipment began failing one by one. Radios went silent. Flashlights flickered. Our digital recorders wiped themselves. Only analog gear held up, the old notebooks, the film cameras. It was as if modern technology was incompatible with whatever this place was. Time itself seemed distorted. A 10-minute walk felt like an hour. Sometimes, we'd emerge from rooms with our watches several minutes off from each other. We started keeping journals by hand, not trusting anything else. On the third day, the signal changed. Just briefly, the SOS stopped and was replaced by a new transmission. A single word in Morse code, stay. We all heard it, clear, deliberate. That night, none of us slept. Something in that ship didn't want to be found, and maybe it didn't want us to leave. The voice on the radio was not part of the original distress signal. We were sure of that. We had decoded the repeating SOS sequence weeks before the expedition, monitored it meticulously, and replayed it hundreds of times. It was always mechanical. Always the same, no variation, no inflection. But on our second night aboard the ship, while we were going over the logs and recording anomalies, the static broke. A low hum came through first, followed by a voice, soft, grainy, distant, like it had traveled across centuries. It wasn't someone yelling for help. It didn't even sound human in the conventional sense. There was a rhythm to the way it spoke, like it had memorized the cadence of human speech, but hadn't fully grasped the emotion behind the words. It said one thing at first: you came back. The entire room fell into silence. Nobody moved. We all heard it through our headsets at the same time. Davis dropped his pen. Jonah stood up like someone had pulled a string in his spine. The translator running in the background caught the sentence, and the waveform on our screens confirmed that it was part of a live transmission. The distress signal had never included speech before. Our first assumption was interference maybe. Someone had intercepted our broadcast and was playing tricks. But the location was too remote. No ships, no aircraft, no satellites in range. And the voice wasn't coming from the radio, it was resonating through the entire frequency band we'd been tracking. The wave pattern itself had changed. It was no longer the rigid, artificial sequence of a beacon. It was more fluid, like speech coded within static. The voice continued, but not consistently. Sometimes it faded for hours, then returned suddenly, saying things that chilled us to the core. "You are early," it remembers. "The blood is still warm." These weren't phrases you'd expect from an automated message. They weren't the kinds of things a trapped survivor would say. They felt like comments directed at us specifically, observations rather than pleas. And yet, no matter how many times we replayed the recordings, we could never predict when it would return. It didn't obey any schedule, didn't loop. The language seemed tailored to us, using vocabulary we understood, but with syntax that felt ... off. Too deliberate. Too exact, as if it had been studying how we speak for a long, long time. Jonah theorized that the voice was a delayed psychic echo, his term for the idea that the ship, or whatever intelligence was guiding the voice, had absorbed memories of those who had entered it before and was now projecting them back. But there were no signs of any prior visitors, no records, no footprints in the ice. And yet, the voice knew things about us. It called us by name. It referenced past missions. It quoted things we'd said just hours before, when no one else had been present. At one point, it repeated something Davis had whispered during a panic attack, word for word. "I don't want to be here anymore." And when he heard it played back, he collapsed. That's when we began to suspect that the voice wasn't coming from a person, or even a recording, but from the ship itself. Not through speakers or transmissions, but directly through the metal, the air, the structure around us. Like it was using the environment as a conductor, manipulating our radios just enough to reach us. Once, during a storm, all of our headsets began playing the same distorted lullaby at the same time. It was a song none of us recognized, but every one of us claimed it sounded oddly familiar, as if from a childhood dream we couldn't quite remember. When we compared notes, we realized we'd all interpreted the lyrics differently, even though we'd heard the same melody. Some heard warnings, others heard invitations. Eventually, we stopped using the radios. It felt like we were feeding it, somehow giving it power, attention. But even without the radios, we heard the voice in other ways. Through the walls, in the vibrations of the floor, in our own thoughts. Jonah began writing entire pages in a language he didn't know. He said he wasn't conscious while writing them, just felt his hand move. The symbols matched the ones carved on the hull of the ship, and as soon as we tried to analyze them, the voice returned with a sentence that froze our blood. "You are remembering too fast." Sleep became impossible. Not because we were scared, but because every time we closed our eyes, the voice would whisper fragments of things we hadn't said, yet things we would say. I had dreams of conversations that hadn't happened, but days later, they did, word for word. The future wasn't just being hinted at, it was being laid out for us, dictated by something ancient and unknowable. The voice wasn't warning us or luring us in. It was recording us, compiling us, storing us as part of something much larger, as if we were just data points in a timeline it had already lived through. By the time we decided to abandon the ship, we realized that the voice had never wanted rescue. It hadn't sent the SOS, or if it had, it wasn't a call for help, it was bait. A lure cast out across the sea of time, waiting for someone to come close enough to hear, to listen, and to never unhear again. When we entered the ship, everything inside was preserved in perfect condition, touched by time, decay, or nature. That in itself was terrifying. We expected rusted metal, rotted wires, or signs of erosion. Instead, we stepped into a pristine interior that looked like it had been sealed just yesterday. The lights, though dim, flickered faintly as if connected to some ancient but still functioning power source. The floors were spotless, the control panels intact, and not a single object inside was out of place. There was no dust, no insects, no mold, nothing organic, just silence. The kind of silence that feels thick, pressing against your ears and crawling under your skin. Every sound we made felt intrusive, like we were disturbing something sacred or forbidden. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, like the ship itself was absorbing them at first. We thought we'd found an advanced research vessel, maybe lost in a classified mission and hidden from public records. But nothing about the ship matched any known design. The architecture was smooth and seamless, like it had been grown rather than built. No rivets, no welding seams. The walls were slightly curved in ways that made depth perception unreliable. Sometimes corridors looked longer or shorter depending on where you stood. There were no doors in the conventional sense. Instead, sections of the wall would silently open as we approached, and close just as smoothly behind us without any mechanical noise. It was unnerving. It felt alive. We found rooms that appeared to serve no clear function. One was entirely spherical, its walls covered in smooth, mirror-like panels that reflected not our current movements, but ones we hadn't yet made. You'd raise your hand, and a split second before you did, the reflection would already show. We tested it again and again, convinced it was some kind of lag in our perception, but it was always the same. The reflections were one step ahead, like the ship anticipated our movements. Another room was filled with dozens of humanoid suits standing upright, facing inward in a circle. They had no seams, no openings, no labels, just matte black surfaces, shaped like they had been molded to specific individuals. Each suit had a symbol on its chest, none of which we could translate. Davis thought they were memorials, like gravestones in armor form, but they weren't dusty or broken. They were warm to the touch. Then there was the control chamber, or what we assumed was the bridge. It was the only area that had a central seat, surrounded by dozens of curved panels embedded with glyphs that reacted to touch. But the moment we entered, something changed. The ambient temperature rose slightly. Our instruments glitched out. For several minutes, and every single watch or timer we carried began running backward. Not quickly, just a slow, steady reversal. We watched the seconds tick in reverse, unable to explain how it was possible. And the strangest part was, we could feel it too. Not physically, but in our thoughts. Some of us began to feel like we'd already been in the room before, that we had sat in the chair, that we had touched the controls. Familiarity set in, like déjà vu with teeth. Jonah vomited and insisted we had been trapped there for years, even though we had only arrived minutes earlier. The chair itself was not built for a human. It was slightly too tall, with a spine-like structure that rose from the back and pulsed gently like a heartbeat. When we got close, it vibrated softly, not in response to touch, but to presence, as if it could sense us. No one dared sit in it, even though we all felt drawn to it. That attraction wasn't logical, it was emotional, deep, primal. It was as if the chair whispered to something buried inside us, something older than memory. One by one, we backed away from it without even discussing it. Some instincts don't need to be put into words. The final room we found was locked, completely sealed. No amount of force or scanning could get through. It didn't respond to our movement like the others did. On the outside of the entrance was a circular indentation, smooth and cold, with an embedded fragment of glass or crystal at the center. It didn't do anything when we touched it, but when Davis accidentally cut his hand on a panel and his blood smeared across the indentation, the door emitted a low sound, a single tone that reverberated in our bones rather than our ears. The crystal glowed faintly red, and for a moment we thought the door would open, but it didn't. The tone stopped, and nothing more happened. Davis insisted he heard a voice when it triggered, but the rest of us heard only the hum. Still, we couldn't shake the feeling that the ship had acknowledged him in some way. Not as an intruder, but as a returnee. After that, the preservation of the ship took on a darker tone. It didn't feel like we had discovered a lost relic. It felt like we had awakened something dormant, something that had been waiting for a long time. The flawless condition of everything inside wasn't a marvel of engineering. It was a warning, a stasis designed not for survival, but for containment. A ship that was never meant to be found, preserved not for exploration, but because it was, holding something inside that must never deteriorate, something patient, something aware. When the cameras began to work again, we didn't notice the difference at first. We were too focused on restarting the systems, documenting the ship's internal layout, and figuring out why half our digital equipment had gone completely dead. But once the feed resumed and we started reviewing the footage later that night, something felt off. The timestamp was normal. The signal quality even better than before, but the footage wasn't exactly what we remembered recording. At first it was just small things. The angle of someone's head being slightly different, an extra step taken that none of us recalled making, or an object on the table shifting position between frames. We thought it might be corrupted data, or maybe overlapping clips, nothing unusual for tech in these environments. But then we noticed the shadows. In the original footage, our team walked down the hallway in a group of 4. On the playback, there was a 5th shadow, perfectly human-shaped, slightly smaller than the rest, moving just a few steps behind us. No one remembered anyone trailing behind, and we cross-referenced every angle. No one was there, but the shadow stayed consistent, always moving when we moved, but never perfectly in sync. It was like it was imitating us, not mirroring us. Sometimes it lagged, sometimes it anticipated our next move. It gave the eerie impression of a child playing follow the leader, but never getting too close. We rewound the footage again and again, frame by frame. When we paused at just the right moment, we caught a reflection. In one of the control room panels, there was a clear but brief glimpse of a figure. Pale, thin, wearing something that looked like an old-fashioned suit, not a spacesuit, not any gear we brought. Just a man, standing perfectly still in the shadows. And he wasn't looking at the team. He was looking directly into the camera. The image only lasted half a second, then vanished in the next frame. We checked the panel in person. There was no one, no smudge, no sign that anyone had been near it. The longer we analyzed the video, the more discrepancies we found. In one section, Davis enters a chamber and examines a console in real time. He did this quickly, with no hesitation. But in the video, he stops halfway through, turns his head slowly to the left, and just stares. Not at anything in particular, just into the air, unmoving for nearly 15 seconds. His face in the footage was blank, almost as if he was in a trance. But none of us remembered him doing that. When we showed him the clip, he swore he never paused. We checked his body cam, and there was no pause on that footage, just in the main feed. Then, more unsettling differences began to appear. Voices that weren't ours faint, whisper-like noises layered beneath our conversations. You couldn't hear them unless you listened with headphones at full volume. The whispers were low, rhythmic, like chanting in a language none of us recognized. They weren't random either, they responded to us. When someone laughed, the voices would briefly stop. When someone asked a question, the whispers got louder for a second, as if reacting. One technician isolated the audio and played it through a spectrogram. The waveform didn't just show audio patterns, revealed shapes. Strange, symmetrical. Patterns that looked like sigils or glyphs. That was the moment people started refusing to be alone with the footage. We archived the video, labeling it corrupted. But no one wanted to delete it either. There was a pull to it, as if erasing it would make something worse. So we stored it in a secure drive, except it didn't stay there. A few nights later, I woke up to find the same footage playing on the tablet by my bed. It had turned on by itself, looping that moment with the extra shadow again and again. I hadn't downloaded it, hadn't opened the file, hadn't even used that tablet since we arrived. I checked the metadata, no signs of access, but the video was there. Others reported similar incidents. The footage would show up on powered off screens, flicker through projectors that hadn't been used in hours, even display on the inner visors of helmets. It wasn't playing in the usual sense, it was appearing, like it was using our own technology to replay itself, whether we wanted it to or not. The last straw came when we found a new clip on the footage section no one had filmed. It was of our entire team standing motionless in one of the rooms, all of us facing the camera, not blinking, not speaking. The camera panned slowly across our faces as if someone else was holding it, but none of us remembered it. None of us had ever been in that pose. It was like the ship had recorded its own version of us, a version we never lived. That's when we realized the video feed wasn't broken. It had been replaced. The ship wasn't just passively displaying what happened, it was choosing what to show. The footage wasn't memory, it was manipulation. And somewhere in those frames was something trying to reach out through us. Through the video, through the very act of watching, as if it knew we couldn't look away.